I died on the day he became a king. Not in battle, not with dignity, but standing below the throne while everyone watched, like I had already lost everything. Remove her. The Crown Prince didn't even look at me when he spoke. No hesitation, no pause, as if I had already stopped existing in his world. My legs gave out before the guards reached me. Pathetic. Even at the end, I couldn't stand properly. Laughter spread through the hall, soft at first, then louder when no one stopped it. You should be grateful, the Saintess said gently, dressed in white, bathed in light. She held a vial in her hand. My vial. My formula, perfected through years no one cared to see. It's thanks to His Highness that your work can finally shine. Her smile was kind, flawless, practiced. I stared at the potion, clear and pure, exactly as I remembered. Because I was the one who made it. Years of work, burned hands, sleepless nights, failures hidden in silence. While he stood above it all, receiving everything I built without ever understanding it, dispose of her. His voice turned colder, sharper, like I had already overstayed my final moment. I looked up, just once, searching for something that wasn't there anymore. Nothing remained. The person I loved, trusted, followed, gone. Or maybe he had always been like this, and I was the only one blind enough to believe otherwise. The guards dragged me away. No one stopped them. No one spoke. I should have screamed, hated, resisted. But instead I laughed, quiet and broken. How stupid. If I could start again, if I had one more chance, I would never choose you. Darkness swallowed everything. Lady, a soft voice pulled me back. My fingers twitched against cold marble, breath returning to my lungs. I opened my eyes to blinding light and a familiar ceiling. The hall. The same hall. The same crowd. The same suffocating silence pressing in from every direction like it had never left me. And at the center, him. The Crown Prince stood before me, expression distant, already preparing the words that would end everything. I knew that look. I had memorized it once. This was the moment. My heart should have raced. I should have felt fear, pain, desperation clawing at my chest. Instead, there was only calm, quiet and steady, like waking from a long, exhausting dream. For the sake of the royal family, he began, voice measured, controlled. I didn't let him finish. I stepped forward, cutting through the moment before it could repeat. The movement alone drew attention. Whispers spread quickly through the hall, confusion rippling across noble faces unprepared for deviation. Good. Let them watch. I reached for the document in his hand, the engagement contract I once treated like my entire future. My fingers didn't shake this time. For a brief second, his brows furrowed. Not anger. Not yet. Just confusion. Wait. Too late. I tore it. The sound cut through the hall, sharp and final. Once, then again, until the contract split cleanly in my hands. The pieces slipped to the floor like something meaningless. Silence followed. Heavy, suffocating, absolute. No one moved. Even he stood frozen, as if the world had tilted beyond his understanding. I met his eyes and smiled, not warmly, not kindly, just enough to show him the truth. I wasn't the same person anymore. You don't need to dismiss me, I said, voice calm, steady, almost polite. I'll save you the trouble. A pause stretched between us, just long enough to settle the weight of it. I'm done. Shock rippled through the hall. Disbelief, whispers, the sound of something falling somewhere in the distance. No one had expected this. The Crown Prince stared at me like he didn't recognize me. Good. Because he shouldn't. In my last life, I would have begged. I would have cried, clung to him even as he pushed me away. I would have chosen him again, no matter the cost. Now there was nothing left to hold on to. "Do you understand what you're doing?" he asked, voice low and controlled, carrying a hint of authority meant to press me back into place. I tilted my head slightly, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "I do. More than you ever will." For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Not anger, not command, uncertainty. It disappeared almost instantly, buried beneath habit and pride. "Very well," he said coldly. "As you wish." Of course. That had always been his answer. I turned before he could say anything else, before anyone could interfere. Each step felt lighter, as if something invisible had finally loosened its grip. The same hall that once suffocated me now felt small, insignificant, like something I had already outgrown without realizing. As I passed, whispers followed me like shadows. Has she gone mad? A useless girl without magic. I ignored all of it. They had always talked. They would always talk. This time I wouldn't listen. Outside, the air felt sharper, cooler, real in a way it hadn't before. I exhaled slowly, letting it settle into my lungs. For the first time, it didn't hurt the same way, though somewhere deep inside, something lingered. A faint ache, not quite gone, not quite healed, like a memory refusing to fade completely. A hand. Cold, steady, holding mine. A voice, low and calm. "Don't die." I stopped. The memory slipped away as quickly as it came, leaving only a faint trace behind. I frowned slightly, trying to grasp something already gone. What was that? No answer came, only silence. I let it go. There were more important things to do now. This time, I wouldn't waste my life chasing someone else's future. I would build my own, starting with what others had overlooked. At the edge of the estate grounds, beyond the paths no one bothered to walk, there was a patch of land overgrown and ignored. In my last life, I passed it countless times without a second glance. A field of weeds. That's what everyone believed. I stepped into it, pushing aside the wild growth as I knelt down. Beneath the leaves, something faintly shimmered, almost invisible if you didn't know where to look. Frostleaf. Rare, misidentified, discarded. In a few months, it would become one of the most valuable ingredients in the Empire. This time, I got here first. I plucked it carefully, holding it between my fingers. Light, fragile, and yet filled with potential no one else had recognized yet. Just like knowledge. Behind me, the world I once knew continued unchanged, unaware that its foundation had already begun to shift. But I had stepped away from that path, and I wasn't going back. This time, I wouldn't build a future for anyone else. Not for a prince, not for a throne, not for a love that never truly existed, only for myself. And this was just the beginning. By the time the rumors from the annulment settled, I had already stopped paying attention to them. Words never built anything, no matter how sharp or cruel they sounded. Knowledge did, and this time, I had no intention of wasting it on anyone else. The frost leaf rested lightly between my fingers, its surface cold and faintly luminous. To most, it was nothing more than an overgrown weed. To me, it was the start of everything, something overlooked by the world but destined to become essential. In 3 months, Frostleaf would stabilize mana flow. In 6, nobles would compete for it. In a year, it would vanish from the market entirely. Right now, it held no value, which made it the most valuable thing I could possess. I returned to the field each morning, gathering more without damaging the roots, careful and methodical. No one noticed what I was doing. No one thought it mattered, which was exactly why it worked so well. A passing servant laughed when she saw me kneeling in the weeds, shaking her head as if I had truly lost my mind. I didn't respond. There was nothing to explain. And even if there were, no one would understand it yet. By the end of the week, I had filled 3 crates with frost leaf, stacked neatly in storage. To anyone else, it looked worthless. To me, it was a foundation. Something that would soon reshape the way this empire understood value. The workshop behind the estate had long been abandoned, coated in dust and neglect. The tools were worn but still functional, enough for what I needed. I cleaned it myself, slowly and quietly, restoring something forgotten into something useful again. The first batch failed completely, collapsing into useless residue. The second held form but broke under pressure. The third was unstable, reacting too quickly to maintain balance. None of that surprised me. I had failed before, countless times. I adjusted the ratios, changed the sequence, allowed the mixture to settle longer than before. Each attempt brought me closer, not through luck, but through memory. By the 4th attempt, the liquid stabilized perfectly, clear and refined beyond expectation. I turned the vial slightly, watching how the light passed through it without distortion. It was cleaner than anything I had produced in my previous life, more efficient, more precise. Not because I was better, but because this time, I already knew the answer. A soft knock came from the doorway, and I didn't need to turn to recognize the hesitation behind it. My maid stepped inside, her expression caught between concern and confusion as she took in the rows of finished vials. "You've been here for days," she said carefully, glancing around the workshop. "The kitchen staff said you haven't been eating properly. Is this because of the Crown Prince?" Her voice softened at the end, uncertain. "No," I replied without hesitation, the answer coming too easily to carry any real weight. Whatever I had felt before had already burned out. There was nothing left of it now, nothing worth holding on to or revisiting. Her gaze dropped to the vials again, curiosity overtaking concern. "These are potions? But you don't have magic." The confusion in her voice was genuine, shaped by everything this world believed to be true. I picked up one of the vials and held it out to her without explanation. "Drink it." She froze immediately, uncertainty flashing across her face as she hesitated, clearly unsure whether to trust me or what she was seeing. "My lady, I can't," she began, but I didn't withdraw my hand. "It's safe," I said simply, leaving no room for doubt. After a brief pause, she accepted it, lifting the vial carefully before drinking. Silence followed as she stood there, processing the effect. Then her eyes widened, her hand moving instinctively to her wrist. "The ache is gone," she whispered, disbelief breaking through her usual composure. Of course it was. I had already seen this result before. "It works," she said again, softer this time, as if saying it out loud made it more real. I allowed myself a small smile, brief but certain. "It always did." Word spread quietly, not through announcements or declarations, but through whispers that carried more weight than anything spoken publicly. A servant mentioned it, a guard overheard, and eventually someone important decided it was worth investigating. The first offer came from a merchant, cautious and skeptical as he stepped into the workshop, his eyes scanning everything with practiced doubt. "I heard you've created something unusual," he said, his tone measured. "I have," I replied simply, offering nothing more. He studied me for a moment before extending his hand slightly. "Then show me." There was no trust in his voice, only curiosity tempered by experience. I handed him a vial without explanation, watching as he examined it closely, searching for flaws he wasn't equipped to find. After a moment, he drank it, his expression shifting almost immediately as the effects settled in. His posture straightened, the tension in his shoulders easing as his breathing steadied. It was subtle, but unmistakable. "How much?" he asked, his voice lower now, the skepticism replaced with something far more serious. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I observed him, measuring his reaction, his intent, the way he recalculated everything he thought he knew. "Limited supply," I said finally, watching his expression tighten slightly. "I can pay," he insisted, misunderstanding the point entirely. "I know," I replied calmly. That was never the issue. "I won't sell in bulk," I continued, letting the decision settle between us. Confusion crossed his face. "Why?" "Because flooding the market would destroy its value. Because control mattered more than speed. Because I had already lived the consequences of giving everything away too easily. Because I decide how much exists," I said simply. He stared at me for a moment longer, before nodding slowly, understanding just enough to accept it. "Then I'll take whatever you're willing to offer." Good. That meant he understood his place. The next few days passed quickly as demand began to grow, quietly at first, then with increasing urgency. I kept production controlled, refusing most requests, allowing scarcity to shape the market exactly as I intended. "The price has doubled," the merchant reported during his next visit, barely concealing his satisfaction. "And people are still asking." Of course they were. That was the natural result of controlled supply. "Let them," I said, unconcerned. He studied me carefully, as if trying to decide whether I was cautious or something far more deliberate. "You're not interested in expanding faster?" he asked. "I am," I replied, meeting his gaze evenly. "Just not recklessly." Power built too quickly drew attention, and attention brought interference. I had no interest in repeating that mistake again. Beyond the estate, the market shifted in subtle ways most people failed to notice. A new supplier appeared, offering something unfamiliar, something better. At first it was dismissed, then questioned, then quietly pursued. "Have you heard?" someone whispered in the courtyard. "The Crown Prince's progress has slowed recently." Another voice dismissed it quickly, but the doubt remained, small and persistent. I walked past without reacting, the conversation fading behind me as if it had nothing to do with me at all. Of course it felt off. The foundation he relied on no longer existed. Back in the workshop, I arranged the latest batch carefully, counting each vial with quiet precision. Profit was rising, influence growing, everything moving exactly as I intended, slow enough to avoid attention, fast enough to matter. This time, everything belonged to me. I closed the storage case and set it aside, the weight of it solid and real in my hands. The Empire hadn't realized it yet, but the balance had already begun to shift. And this time, I wasn't working in the shadows anymore. The invitation arrived without warning, sealed in black wax and marked with a crest I did not recognize at first glance. The weight of it felt different from the others, heavier, as if it carried more than simple intent. My maid hesitated before handing it to me, her expression unusually tense as she lowered her voice. "This came directly from the palace. They said it could not be delayed." I broke the seal. The message inside was brief, precise, and impossible to ignore. A royal banquet. Attendance required, not a request, a summons. I folded the letter once and set it aside, my thoughts already moving ahead. News of my potions had spread further than I intended, faster than I had planned. It was no longer something I could keep contained. That was fine. If the Empire wanted to see, I would let them. The banquet hall felt different the moment I stepped inside. The whispers no longer carried ridicule, but curiosity sharpened into something heavier, something that lingered longer than simple interest. They were watching me now, carefully. The new supplier. The one behind the potions. I heard even the Capital Guild is trying to trace her. I moved through the crowd without slowing, my expression calm, my steps steady. Attention followed naturally, no longer something I needed to chase or earn. This time, it came on its own. At the center stood the Crown Prince. He looked unchanged at first glance, composed and controlled, But the illusion didn't last. There were flaws now, subtle disruptions in his mana, small inconsistencies that betrayed something deeper. He was weakening. His gaze found mine immediately. This time, there was no dismissal, no indifference, only focus, sharp and searching, as if trying to understand something already slipping beyond his reach. "You've been busy," he said, his voice measured, but lacking its usual certainty. "I have." A pause settled between us, heavier than before, filled with everything he had never noticed, and everything I no longer cared to explain. "I've heard concerning things," he continued. "Unverified potions circulating through the capital. That kind of influence can be dangerous." "Concern or control." "Strange," I replied calmly. "You didn't seem concerned when you were using them." The silence that followed spread slowly, like something sinking into the floor beneath us. The nobles closest to us stilled, understanding catching up with implication. "I don't know what you mean," he said. "Of course." "You should," I said softly. "After all, the formula you praised so highly was mine." The words landed without force, but their weight carried across the hall. Conversations faltered, attention shifting as doubt replaced certainty in quiet, dangerous ways. "That's impossible. The Saintess created it. Then why does this feel familiar?" The Crown Prince stepped closer, his composure tightening. "You're overstepping." "Am I?" I lifted a vial from the nearby table, letting the light pass through it slowly, deliberately, drawing every eye toward something simple, undeniable. "Then explain this," I said. "Why does your progress slow the moment my supply disappears?" No one answered. No one needed to. The truth settled on its own. His silence confirmed it. The shift in the room was immediate. Respect tilted, doubt spreading, no longer directed at me, but at him, at the foundation he had always stood on without understanding. "This was never your strength," I said, my voice calm, almost gentle. "You just didn't know where it came from." He had no answer. For the first time, he stood in silence, stripped of certainty, stripped of control. Then the air changed, cold, heavy, unavoidable. The doors opened, and she entered without announcement. The crowd parted instinctively, conversations dissolving before they could finish, replaced by something closer to instinct than respect. The Empress. She moved through the hall without looking at anyone. Not the nobles, not the Crown Prince waiting at the center. Her presence was quiet, controlled, but absolute. She walked past him and stopped in front of me. Up close, her gaze was sharper, more focused than anything I had felt before. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't interest. It was recognition. "So," she said softly, her voice low enough that it belonged only to me. "This is what you look like now." Now, not for the first time. I held her gaze. "We've never met." Her lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but something more deliberate. "Haven't we?" Her eyes didn't move, didn't shift, didn't allow distance to form between us. It wasn't pressure. It was attention, precise and unwavering, the kind that made looking away feel like losing something. I didn't look away. "You're calmer than before," she murmured. "Last time you were trembling." My breath stilled for a fraction of a second. That wasn't something she should know. "You're mistaken," I said. "I rarely am." Her voice lowered further as she stepped closer, just enough to change the space between us, not enough to draw notice, but enough to make the difference undeniable. "You're holding back," she said softly. I didn't answer. She leaned slightly closer. "I can tell." My fingers tightened, barely noticeable. She noticed anyway, Behind us, the Crown Prince stepped forward again, his voice cutting in with restrained tension. Your Majesty, if you are seeking an alchemist, the palace can provide far more qualified candidates. She didn't look at him. I wasn't asking. The dismissal was quiet, absolute. The Crown Prince fell silent again. Her attention returned to me. You built this yourself, she said, her gaze tracing over me, not an inspection, but recognition. Without magic, without support, without permission, and you are still holding back. I stilled slightly. You're observant, I said. I remember enough. Enough. The word lingered. She stepped closer again, the distance narrowing with quiet intention. Come with me, she said quietly. A pause. Or stay here, and let them realize what you really are. Her gaze softened, just slightly. Either way, you won't stay small. I met her eyes fully. I don't belong to anyone. The words were steady, certain. For a moment, something shifted in her expression, something quieter, something closer to approval. Good, she said softly. Her gaze lingered a second longer than necessary. Then it will be your choice. Behind her, the hall felt distant, irrelevant, like something that no longer had the power to define anything about me. The Crown Prince stood in silence, watching, unable to interrupt, unable to reclaim anything. I turned away, not dismissed, not defeated, choosing to leave. One step, then another. Wait, her voice followed. I stopped. In my memory, she said slowly, each word deliberate. You died. A pause. But not before you chose me. My breath caught. Tell me, she continued, her voice quieter now. Why didn't you this time? The memory surfaced clearer than before, a hand, cold, steady. Don't die. I exhaled slowly and continued walking. I didn't look back. But this time, I knew. The past I changed had not let go of me, and neither had she.
Stay with me, because this time, she won't lose anything again. And if you enjoy GL stories like this, make sure to subscribe.